Welcome back. Today we are working on the hammer block, one of my favorites in this quilt series because it looks so good on the finished quilt. This one sits right in the middle of the difficulty scale. It's not as simple as the traffic cone or the hard hat, but it's definitely not one of the trickiest ones either. The main difference here is that you'll be sewing a couple sections together before joining them with the rest of the block, but I'll walk you through it exactly how it works. Before we start sewing, let's get your pattern taped together and colored in. Print out your pattern pages, line up the edges where they connect, and tape them together on the back so your front stays clean. Then color in each section. With the hammer block, you'll notice the pattern is broken into a couple separate sections, and that's intentional. You'll sew each one individually and then join them together at the end. So we'll color those in the same way, making sure every piece that shares the same fabric gets the same color. And then once you have everything taped and colored, you are ready to start sewing. All right, we're gonna start with our first section here. We've got our first piece of fabric underneath the number 1, and the pretty sides are going to be facing the table right now. So ugly sides facing the paper, and then you're gonna pin it in place so it doesn't shift or move around when you work on number 2. When you go to number 2, the only difference between what you did with number 1 and number 2 is that you are going to do pretty sides together. We're going to fold that pattern back and then create a seam allowance by cutting that excess fabric for number 1. And again, we're going to take our fabric, pretty side facing up, and then you're going to place that along the pattern you just, or the seam allowance you just created. We're going to double check that when you fold it back, it's going to cover that entire piece, which we are good there. There we go, we sewed along that black line. It's really important that you're as accurate as possible along that black line because that's going to make the difference between the pattern or the block coming together perfectly by following the pattern or being a little bit wonky. All right, now that we've got number 2, we're going to repeat that exact same process. We're going to fold back our pattern along that line. The reason for that is so you can create that seam allowance and reduce some bulk. And then you're going to get your second piece of paper. You're going to have pretty sides facing up. And because this is a triangle, this might be a little bit tricky, but don't panic. You're going to fold that pattern back, and you see the part where it's upside down, like you're not seeing the pattern picture. That is helping you determine whether or not, if you have your fabric placed correctly, if you fold it back, it will be covered all the way. So we fold it down and then put that back, put the pattern down so you can see the outline and make sure that there's an area 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Then you're going to sew along that line and then pull it back and press it to just confirm that you've covered everything. And then trim your excess fabric. It's really not that bad as long as you just take the extra time to fold that pattern back and use the back of the pattern to eyeball whether or not you're covering your piece entirely. Otherwise, the triangles can be a little bit tricky, but as long as you follow that, you'll be set. We're going to do that exact same process. So your pretty sides facing up, you're going to line it up against that seam allowance you just created, and because the back of the pattern doesn't cover the extra fabric, you know that it's covered that entire section when you fold it back. All right, we're making our way through this pretty quickly here. Like I said, this is a good one to practice those advanced skills a little bit, but also not overwhelming because it's a fairly simple block. All right, we're gonna do pretty sides facing each other, and because the back of that pattern does not cover the excess fabric, the fabric extends past the back of that the pattern more than 1/4 of an inch, you know that your bases are covered and you've got enough fabric there. So we're going to press that and then do the exact same thing on this other side as well. So again, you're going to get your fabric out, put it pretty sides facing up, and just confirm, because when we fold down that pattern, that there's excess fabric on the other side, and you can kind of use your fingers to feel where it's going to land, and because we've got excess there, we went ahead and sewed across that line. So we're going to press this, and you've finished your block. We'll move on, or finished your piece, not the block. We're going to move on to the next piece so we can finish your block though. All right, so we've got our first one there. We're gonna cut that, make sure that it covers the block completely, which it does. We pin that down, and then we've got our second piece of fabric here. So the second piece of fabric set in. I'm gonna press the seam, and then we just have one more piece right here. One thing about foundation paper piecing and pressing your seams open, you want to make sure that you're not pulling the seams, because then you're going to start seeing your thread in between. You want to be gentle when you're pressing your fabric, set your seam, and then open it up and kind of iron it out to lay it flat, rather than using the iron to push it open. All right, we've got our second section, and now we're on to the last. All right, again, so we've got our first piece of fabric here, and we know that it is extending past the two lines on either side. We've pinned it down so it doesn't shift, and then we're gonna fold that pattern back so we can clean up our excess fabric from placing it on number 1, and then it gives us that nice seam allowance and a guide to place our second piece of fabric. All right, you'll see here I'm laying it down, pretty sides together, and because the fabric extends past the pattern that's folded down, you know that you have enough that when you open it up, it's going to cover the rest of that paper. We're gonna press our seams again very gently, and then repeat the process for number 2. It's exactly the same. Place your fabric, pretty sides up. There we go. Sew. Flip, press, trim, sew, flip, press, trim. It's such a repetitive process. It gets really meditative as you are working through it. Once you understand and get the concepts, it's really just like so fun. All right, so now we've got all of our pieces, so we're gonna follow our assembly page here. It's talking about putting A and B together, and once A and B are together, then we're going to add C. So we're gonna go clean up the part of the sections that need to be added together. Personal preference, just for my sanity, I like to trim all the way around. My mom, as you can see here, she likes to just trim the parts that are being put together to leave excess around the outside of the pattern. Personal preference, if you leave excess around the side of the pattern, then, you know, if it happens to be a little bit shorter than you want, you've got a little bit of wiggle room. So there is a benefit there. All right, we like to put the pin through the corners to make sure that they line up. And then after you put the pin through, to make sure that it comes out on the other side in the same spot, we'll use clips. You'll open it up and double check that you like the way that it's sitting. This one's pretty easy because there's not any continuous lines that you need to match up. And after you've got that done, then we'll do C. This one is very important to pay attention to because you do have 2 lines that you want to match up. So 2 points that you need to verify that you've got lined up perfectly, and that's to connect the hammer to the handle so it's not offset or crooked. Right now you'll see we are putting the pins in there to just double, triple check that we've got those points where we want them, and then as we're checking, we will add the clips if we verified that yes, that is where we want it to be. All right. My mom also likes to put in little stitches like at those 2 points and then open it up and verify that it is dead on, which that one is. We're perfect with that one. And then once she verifies, she will go back and add that, add the clips and then sew right across that black line. It's just really important that you're careful with this because you're doing all of this time to do the piecing part, and then the assembly can really make or break it, right? It's the difference between a nice cohesive image on a block or, you know, a piece kind of spotty, crooked image. All right, we've verified that we like the placement there, so that's solid. We'll just make sure that everything is smooth, put those clips on there, and then just follow the rest of that black line on the pattern so we ensure that we're sewing it on there correctly. There we have it. We will pull back that paper, press your seams down so that you're reducing bulk. And there we have it. We've got the hammer block done. If you've already done the traffic cone, the hat, and the dirt pile, you're really building out this quilt like really nicely. The bigger blocks are next. The cement mixer, dump truck, front loader, and excavator. They all use the same exact skills you've been practicing, so you're ready for them. If you want the pattern for the hammer or full construction site bundle, the links to the Etsy shop are down below in the description. The blocks themselves may be a little bit different than what you're seeing here because these tutorials are specifically for our Mighty Construction Site quilt, and the blocks are set off center or differently than the construction bundles because it is for the visual appeal of the quilt. If this tutorial helped you, give us a thumbs up, it means a lot. And subscribe so you don't miss any of these blocks still to come. Love seeing your finished blocks. I hope that you enjoy this tutorial, and happy quilting.